This is a story called The School Teacher's Story. Gary is a 32-year-old single man who has been working as a high school teacher for 8 years. However, one day he's visiting his friend in another town when he saw an advertisement for a school teacher and he applied for the job and got it. The school was in a really rough area, but Gary didn't care. 2 weeks after leaving his old job, Gary started his new job. The kids were wild and had no respect for their school teachers. When Gary walked in and introduced himself, the kids got up, walked out of the classroom and into the schoolyard. Gary followed them out and tried to get them in, but some of them walked off and left the school premises. Gary knew that he would have his work cut out trying to teach this class. The following day, when Gary walked into the classroom, the kids were messing about, throwing screwed up paper at each other. Gary told them to settle down, but they took no notice of him. Gary shouted at them and told them to settle down, but no one listened and they walked out again. However, a few days later, Gary was at his wit's end and he was all set for quitting and going back to his old job, but one of the other teachers told him that the kids would settle down eventually. Gary tried in vain to get the kids to settle down and listen to him for over a week. All the kids did so far was remain in the classroom. Then one day Gary had an idea. He went out and bought a whistle. The next day he took it into work with him. When the kids were let into the classroom, they started messing about straight away and they wouldn't settle down, so Gary blew the whistle. The kids still refused to settle down, so he blew the whistle again and still they didn't settle down. He then decided to walk around the classroom blowing the whistle. The kids soon settled down, although some of them walked out and ran out of the school and refused to come back. The next day when they came to school, Gary said, "I have the names of all those who walked out yesterday and I want you all to see me after school." However, when school finished, none of the kids turned up. The next morning, Gary had the same kids all morning, and at the end of the lesson, just before the school bell rang, he said to them, "From now on, you do as I say when I say. Anyone who doesn't will be punished." The kids just laughed at him. Then, as the kids were about to leave, Gary blew his whistle and shouted, "Sit down now. You have 10 minutes left of this lesson and you will sit quietly in your seats until the bell goes and I give you permission to leave." The kids took no notice, and when Gary turned round to write the homework he wanted the kids to do on the board, they got up and headed for the door. When one of them tried to open it, but they couldn't because it was locked. "Sir, why is the door locked?" "The door will remain locked until you have all written these instructions down for your homework that are on the board. I want this homework handed in first thing tomorrow morning or there will be consequences." To his surprise, the next morning some of the kids had done their homework and they handed it in on time. Gary knew that this was progress. It wasn't much progress, but it was better than nothing. That day when some of the kids got up to leave, Gary locked the door and took the key out. He then told them to sit down and to get on with their work. Quite surprisingly, they did. Gary told them that the door would be locked every time anyone tried to leave without his permission. Some of the kids weren't happy and they kicked off, throwing things around the classroom. When they calmed down, Gary told them that they had to do 2 hours of after-school detention for a week. That day, when school finished, none of the kids turned up for detention. The following morning, when Gary arrived at school, he went to the classroom and found it completely smashed up. All the kids' work that had been on the wall had been pulled down, had been pulled off and ruined. The kids were upset by this. Gary said, "I know exactly who did this. If you want to stay in this school, you will remain after class. Otherwise, the police will be called and I'll let them deal with you." As suspected, the culprit didn't remain after class, so he went to their home. As he got there and approached the door, he heard crying, screaming and banging. He knocked on the door, but no one answered, so he opened the door and discovered the boy's stepdad laying into him. His mum was just sat there high on drugs, and there was 4 other kids. A 6-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, a 2-year-old boy and a 6-month-old boy. All of them were filthy and terrified. The baby and the 2-year-old had severe nappy rash due to being left in soaking wet nappies for days. Gary called the police and they came with social services. The kids were taken into care and their parents were arrested. After they'd been in care for a week, Gary noticed that the boy Lucas was settling down, and so did the other kids. After Gary had been working at the school for just a month, the whole class had finally settled down and were behaving themselves. None of them got up to leave without permission again. None of the other staff, including the headmaster, could believe it. All of them thought that this was never going to happen because these kids were the worst behaved in the whole school. Gary has now been working at the school for over 7 months, and in that time he has brought the kids a long way. Now they have grown to love and respect him. Lucas, the boy whose stepfather beat him up, turned out to be very intelligent. He passed his 11+ exams with flying colours and he got the highest grades possible. Now he is doing work that he would be doing if he was in year 9, even though he was only in year 7. The end. Thank you.